My name's Rod, and I'm an alcoholic. I think, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for your hospitality, the committee. This great honor to come and share with you. You know, I can't express to you how grateful I am for that. We've just been having a great time here. I went to the old timers meeting on Friday night. It was really neat to see Eleanor, and there were 20 people that got to share. And out of those 20 people, there was over 600 years of sobriety. I was just like, wow, that is so cool. And then yesterday, I had a chance to go to a Lavinia forum, and that was just a real exciting, great day. I talked a lot about service, and that's one of my passions. And Irina was there from Lavinia. She's a Lavinia editor, and it was just great to experience that fellowship, that energy and spirit. I really love that too. And then today, to be here with all of you, it's just amazing. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Over the years, I'm 30 years sober, and over the years, you know, I've come to learn a lot about this book and the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts. And one of the things that I've learned from that is knowledge of the path is not a substitute for walking it. That's something I've always tried to remember for myself. I'm full-blooded Navajo. I was born on the Navajo reservation, and I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, that area, and that's where my home is now. And one of the things that I feel like I'm a brother to the Hispanic AAs is because of, you know, Native Americans trying to. Right now, they're working on a Navajo translation of the Big Book, and I just really, I'll say a little bit more of that, but that's why I have that common bond, I think. And one of the things that I've noticed, Indian people have a hard time with AA, and yet I think some of the principles and the traditions are very, very similar. Let me give you an example. I go to sweat lodge ceremonies, and for those of you that don't know, a sweat lodge ceremony is like 4 or 5 hours long, and it's domed about like this, and about circular from here to the end of the stage there. And in the middle of the lodge, there's a pit about 3 feet across and about 1.5 feet deep. And before the ceremony starts, they'll have put into a fire rocks about this big, about the size of a small watermelon, and they'll put them in there until they get glowing red hot, and then they'll bring them in and put them into the pit, and the medicine man or the spiritual leader will pour water on the rocks, and steam will come off, and that's when the sweat lodge ceremony starts. Native people believe that everything has a voice, and that the rocks are our grandfathers, and the way that they speak to us is through the steam as it comes off the rocks. They're called the elders. There was this one sweat I went to, and the man pouring the water for the people performing the ceremony, he said, "I've done some things that caused me great shame and great guilt." And he said, "I went and talked to my elders about that. And he said, I feel unworthy to pour the water for the people." And he said, "My elders said to me, it is exactly because of that great shame and great guilt that you need to pour the water for the people." I was thinking, 4th step, 5th step. Wow, what's... And things like that. I went to an AA convention in Arizona, and one of the natives said that there's so many similarities. He said, I think Bill went to a lot of powwows before. But that's one of the examples. And as I go along, I'll try and share other similar examples. There's a lot of stuff about humility that Native people believe in, and harmony. And I remember I went to this one sweat, and this guy said, if you took all of the creepy crawlies off of the earth would perish. If you took all of our winged brothers and sisters off of the earth, the earth would perish. If you took off our four-legged brothers and sisters, the earth would perish. If you would take all of the green living things off of the earth would perish. And then he said, if you took man off of the earth would flourish. And that got me right-sized. That kind of got me like to my place in this world and the harmony that I need to. And that's like a four-step kind of thing too. That's like what we're all trying to do, is to understand, to shrink this ego. And that's one of the things I thought I would start with, is to, before we need to deal with our alcoholism, I think we need to understand the nature of that. And for me, one of the really good examples is this gentleman who worked at the General Service Office for over 40 years, and he died this past year. And his name was Dennis Manders. He was a non-alcoholic. And I wanted to read something that at the end that he said. Retired now for over 23 years, Dennis still looks fondly on his time with Alcoholics Anonymous. With characteristic bean counter humor, as he refers to it, Dennis shares his thoughts on why AA's financial managers customarily have been non-alcoholics. There's nothing in the bylaws, but the feeling was that an alcoholic might abscond overnight with the funds. It happens, and it probably still happens today. And that is true. There are still thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, So it's be really careful, and it's putting as many safeguards as you can in taking care of the seventh tradition funds. As a matter of fact, he says, there used to be a joke going around about how the tradition of holding hands at the end of a meeting got started. The joke says it came about because at this one little group, while they were saying the prayer, somebody swiped the funds right out of the hat. So thereafter, whenever they said the prayer and closed the meeting, they all held hands. I thought that was just a myth, but I guess it really happened. And that's the way I can be. I don't know about you guys, but when I came to, it was like, what can I steal? What can I hawk? What do I need to do to get drunk today? And whatever it was, I did it. And I wasn't above anything. Another thing that is a really good example of this nature, the nature of an alcoholic, is this joke in the Grapevine. And I would encourage, if you're not subscribing to the Grapevine, I would really encourage all of you to. You're probably aware of the financial straits that the Grapevine and Lavinia are in, and I would just encourage you to do your best to get a subscription and support the Grapevine. They're going through some really difficult times. The staff there is just amazing. Lavinia's with Arena's with the Lavinia staff, and they just do outstanding work to present to you a publication each month in and month out, under really adverse situations. And we all know it's a quality magazine, so do as much as you can to support that. Anyway, this joke goes, this guy leaves the bar, and he's driving down the freeway, and he gets this call from his wife on the cell phone. And she says, I'm calling to warn you, I'm watching the news here, and they're saying there's this one guy driving down the freeway the wrong way. And the drunk says, one, hell, there's hundreds of them. Thank you. But see, that's the way I can be. The world revolves around me instead of me being part of the world. As a matter of fact, I remember an old timer took me aside early on in my sobriety. And I just wanted to say, too, that sobriety countdown was just so heartwarming for me. Oh, my goodness. It was like as we were getting down to one day, it was like I was returning to the womb, I could remember all of that. Oh, my goodness. Well, anyway, I lost my place. What was my... Oh, yeah, the wrong way. The old-timer pulls me aside, and he says to me, Rod, thousands of years ago, there was this guy named Copernicus. And he discovered that the world and the planets revolve around the sun. So it's proven that the world does not revolve around your sorry little butt. I thought he was a little rude, but he made his point. The other thing about this selfishness that I think is so, for me, is really powerful, and I think for a lot of alcoholics that can be the case too, if not all alcoholics. I remember I was at a meeting and I was, crying and moaning and about my life and all of the difficulties I was going through, and this guy pulled me over, another old-timer. You got to love the old-timers. And he said, Rod, I heard you speak, and I think what you ought to do is write a letter to each of these places that are causing you so much problems. The utility company for the bills you have to pay, your boss at work, your family, your relationships. He says, write a letter to them and explain what you're going through. And he said, maybe in a couple of weeks you'll get a letter from the electric company, and they'll say, boy, Rod, we didn't know how tough you were having it. What a credit to our community you will be when you get through this. Do not pay the rest of this year's utility bills. Now, he could have stopped. He made his point, but he kept going. And maybe your boss will say, Rod, I'm so sorry, we just didn't know how difficult it is to stay sober. What an asset to our company you will be when you get through this. We're going to give you a raise and the rest of the month off without pay. And your family and your relationships, they'll say the same thing. We just didn't know, Rod. We're so sorry we didn't support you like we could. We're going to walk on eggshells whenever you're around. And whatever you need, we're going to do it. And I knew how absurd that was. And he was being so sarcastic. But way in the back of my mind, this little voice said, yeah, why not? And that's kind of when I knew this ego had to be kind of settled down, taken care of, that these kinds of stories helped me to see that. Because I have to admit, when I first came to AA, I thought I was the most compassionate, giving person in the whole world, that there should be statues of me in city parks, And I started doing my step work, and I saw that wasn't the case, And one of the things that helped me tremendously was service work. There are probably people in here who, this morning or yesterday morning, you woke up and you said, I think I'll help my neighbor with their yard work, or I'll think I'll make my neighbor some cookies, or something like that. I have never woke up and had that thought. And again, this is part of this alcoholic's nature. So why service was so great for me is it put me on the firing line, where I was able to do those things where by myself I wouldn't have. And I'm so grateful that all of the lessons that I learned from doing this service work has just been absolutely amazing. And the blessings that I've had as a result of that have been absolutely amazing. I can't begin to tell you all of that, simply from being a delegate for Utah in '97 to the Pacific Regional Trustee. I wouldn't have been able to meet all of you and have this wonderful weekend if it wasn't for all of the service work that I've done. I would tremendously encourage all of you to do that as much as you can. We have 3 legacies in Alcoholics Anonymous: recovery, unity, and service. A legacy is something, it means something that's passed from generation to generation. And I think that's one of our challenges that we have for us as members of Alcoholics Anonymous. That, well, let me say it this way. I want to thank the chair for chairing this meeting and taking care of it like we did, but somebody chaired this before that, and somebody chaired it before that, and before that. For 28 years, somebody's been doing that. And then somebody brought AA to Washington, D.C., and Maryland and Virginia. We can trace that lineage all the way back to Bill and Ebby sitting across the table from each other on that kitchen table those many years ago. We are all part of that. If you're in this room, you are part of that history. You are part of that lineage. And I think that means you now have an obligation and a responsibility to make sure that this meeting continues to be here next year and next year and next year. And the same thing with your home groups. I was told early on in my sobriety that the most important person in any AA meeting is the newcomer. And I've come to learn there's somebody even more important than that. And that's the person who hasn't walked through that door yet. And we need to make sure that we are here when that happens. You know, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, you know, decades down the road. We need to take care of this program for that to happen. Bill called the 12 traditions, the 12 points to assure AA's future. And it's been said that the threat to AA survival is not going to come from without AA, but from within AA. And that's a challenge for all of us to be mindful of all three legacies, not just the first legacy, all three of them. Terribly, terribly important, I feel. When I first went to my first AA meeting out of a treatment program, there was this guy sitting at a table with his big book. And that was the first meeting I went to after that treatment program. I found out later that he had been doing that, showing up, just him and the big book by himself for about 1.5 to 2 years. I shudder to think, what if he would have said, nobody's coming to these meetings? You know, I had to just go home, spend time with my family, watch the TV, have dinner. Nobody's coming to these meetings. I'm wasting my time here. He never did. He kept showing up week after week and opening that meeting. And I have such a great amount of debt to that man and to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that showed me that I need to make myself available in a similar fashion. And I've tried to do that as much as I can. We have what we call in the Pacific region. I'll share a little bit about what that is here in a few minutes. We have PRASA. It stands for Pacific Regional Alcoholics Anonymous Service Assembly. And we had it in Boise, Idaho one year, and this guy, he got up and he said, I do service work to pay back the debt I owe AA. The only problem is, the longer I stay in this thing, the bigger the debt gets. You know, and that's true for me. I have so much that AA has given me. It's hard. I could be here for all day telling you everything that I've been blessed from by AA. I think that when you get a chance that you do whatever you can in AA service, I really, like I said, I think that's terribly important. I've learned so many wonderful lessons as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous and the service work. Let me give you an example, because I think for me, one of my greatest challenges was coming to terms with the nature of my alcoholism, which is stupidity, selfishness, and stubbornness. And I was the chair of a district, and we had this general service representative GSR meeting. We held them monthly, and this was back when the great smoking, non-smoking wars occurred in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe some of you can remember that. So we had the smoking people over here and the non-smoking people over here, and we were voting whether the district meeting should be smoking or non-smoking. And so the debate went on for about 45 minutes, and there were volleys thrown back and forth, you know, and verbal missiles, and you know, there were some wounded and maimed, you know, so that happened there. It got pretty ugly. And after everything was settled down, we voted. As most of you know, the group conscience is what determines what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we voted, and the vote was that it be a smoking meeting. And one of the beautiful things about Alcoholics Anonymous service meetings is the minority opinion gets an opportunity to speak. Okay, and so I said, does anybody from the minority opinion, the group that lost, the non-smokers, does anybody want to speak anything you want to say? And I'll never forget, this red-headed lady got up, she was pregnant, and she said, Alcoholics Anonymous service work has saved my life. but I'm pregnant, and I fear for the health of my unborn child with this secondhand smoke. So if this meeting continues to be a smoking meeting, I'm going to have to resign my position. And she sat down. And then at that point, I said, does anybody who voted in the majority want to change their vote? And somebody raised their hand, and we voted again, and it became a non-smoking meeting. You know, I was just floored, you know, because we know how, if you were the kind of smoker I was, you know, nowhere in AA does it say anything about not smoking. You know, don't mess around. But they changed their mind out of the love that they had for this lady. All of them. You know, and it gave me the idea of the capacity that we have to love. The capacity that I have to love, and the way that we can be to take care of each other. In almost every instance I can remember, even when one AA has a really hard time with the other AA, when relapse comes into the picture, all of that goes away. And we circle the wagon, so to speak, and we take care of each other. One of my favorite lines in the song is, a race of angels bound with one another. And I think that's what we are. I think before we got here, that in heaven we all hung together in one corner. We understand this thing that binds us. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's a real painful thing. I don't know about you guys, but I don't ever want to go back to that thing alcohol turned me into. I had gotten to a point where I wasn't living. I was existing. I was breathing in and breathing out. And that's about all you could say for me. In the book Hell's Angels, there's a saying that describes me perfectly during this time. He who makes a beast out of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. He who makes a beast out of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. And that's what I had become. And I said to myself, if this is life, I'd just as soon be dead. And I've got scars on my wrist to prove that it's exactly how I felt. And I didn't think there was anything that could be done. I was hopeless and helpless. And I didn't care at the same time. I got very self-destructive. A lot of mornings I wake up and I'm just so grateful that I'm drawing a sober breath. My dad was run over crossing the highway in the middle of the night, drunk on his ass, and when he was 60 years old. He started drinking when he was 15. He never knew another way of living. You just get drunk whenever you can, however you can. That's what his life became, and that's what my life had become. The way that the people around me drank, I got to believe that everybody woke up and had a can of beer for breakfast. I really did believe that. Everybody I knew woke up and had a beer for breakfast. So I just thought, this is the way it is. You're going to live and drink and die, and that's how life is. And I had accepted it. I had no choice in the matter. I did not know there was another way to live, and I don't think my dad did either. We should all be so grateful for that opportunity where we got a chance to stop and be still, and see where we were at, where we were, and where we were going, which is another native tradition. And we were able to discern, live this way or live this way. And up until that happened for me through AA, it never had occurred to me. This counselor said to me, Rod, I give you permission to quit drinking the way you've been drinking. And that is the first time in my life that thought ever occurred to me. It sounds crazy, but it's exactly, kind of went, you mean I don't have to come to in the drunk tank? You mean I don't have to bring shame and humiliation to my family? You mean I don't have to worry my mom's sick? You mean I don't have to come to with bandages on my wrists? Is this what you're saying? I said, yes, this is what I'm saying. You don't have to live like that anymore. And that's why I'm so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous to have me be free from that bondage. it was really crazy, as I'm sure all of you know. I can remember being released from jail on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and here's the jail, and about a half a block away, there's a bar. And where did they go? Yeah, to the bar. And if you were walking alongside me, you would say, "Hey, Rod, dumbass, you just got released from jail for an alcohol-related arrest, and now you're going to go drink some more alcohol? Rod, alcohol-related arrest, drinking alcohol. There might be a connection." And I swear, I did not believe that. I did not think that was the case. It was because the cops were out for me. It was because I turned left instead of turning right. It was because I left the party 5 minutes too late or 5 minutes too early. It was never about me putting alcohol into my body. I remember sitting in jail and I was thinking to myself, maybe these people are right. My family, these counselors, the policemen, the judges, maybe they're right. Maybe I do drink a little too much. And this is kind of where my life had gotten. And coming to AA and then getting into service work really helped me to start turning some of that stuff around. I was encouraged and told to do service work, like chair AA meetings in prison, in jail, in treatment centers, and in detoxes. And I have to be honest, I balked at that. I did not want to do that. And yet I did. Like I said, AA put me on the firing line, where by myself I wouldn't have done that. I can remember going to this one jail meeting, and there were some security violations, so we couldn't meet in the same room, and they put us into this large broom closet with no chairs, and so there's like about 15 or 20 of us sitting on the floor. And I'm chairing the AA meeting, and I look up on the wall, and there's a payphone on the wall. And then next to the payphone, there's this list of bail bondsmen's phone numbers. And I said to myself, oh my God, that's the phone. This is the room where I used to make that phone call. And now I'm chairing an AA meeting here. Talk about a defining moment. It was like this awareness came to me from all of that. I didn't really appreciate doing those kinds of meetings, like jail and prison meetings. But when I left, I always had a better attitude. Because when that door slammed shut, I got to go home. And there were a lot of times when it slammed shut, I didn't get to go home. And if any of you have been locked up, there's a difference between jail air and free air. It breathes differently, right? And so one of the things that I think that I wanted to share with you is about going to the General Service Conference and going to Stepping Stones. Stepping Stones is where Bill and Lois lived out the remaining years of their lives. There's a story about Bill and Lois living at people's houses, sometimes over here for a week, over here for a month, and they lived like that for a few years. And as they were making one of these journeys in Grand Central Station, Lois collapsed in a heap. And she said, I can't go on like this. And so Bill got together with some of the friends, and they were able to find this place in about 40 miles north of Manhattan. And through some help and some financial aid kind of things, they were able to move in. At first, they called it Bill and Lo's place. And then they changed it to Stepping Stones based on the large stones that led from the garage to the main house, and of course a reference to our 12 steps. I had a chance to go there now 5 times, and as a delegate and then as a trustee. And let me tell you, it is just amazing. I never thought a building could hug anybody until I went to Stepping Stones. And it is just like it's like you're embraced by the history and the legacy of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a chance to see on the second floor where Lois began Al-Anon, in these little cubby holes that she kept track of the mailings. And thank God for the Al-Anons. Oh my goodness, to put up with the likes of us, wow. I don't know about you guys, but if it had been reversed, I would have left myself a long time ago. And the Al-Anons just stick there continuing to love us. It's inspiring. And so in that room, in that house, there's this little table it's oval shaped about that big and about that high. And this is where they said Bill did seances and the Ouija board. Legend has it Bill levitated that table. Now, I don't know about that part. You know how we can be about exaggerating things. But I had a chance to go through that and go over to Wits End, where Bill did the majority of his writings, a lot of that for the Grapevine back then. And it's a smaller room, probably a square about 30, 40 feet across, 50 feet, something like that. And there, sat at his desk, put my feet on his desk, got my picture taken. That was really exciting. Our fifth tradition tells us what this whole thing is about. Each AA group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose: carrying the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. When you get down to the basic, it comes to one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic. Our first tradition tells us how crucial this is. This is a long form of the first tradition. Each member of AA is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows closely afterward. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Now, I think about me dying. I think that's pretty important. I think about me and you dying. That's even that much more important. When I think about us, most of us surely dying, that's of the utmost importance. And this is why we need to take care of the fellowship. This is why we need to do that. It doesn't say some of us might die, or some of us will surely die. It says most of us will surely die. In the upstairs bedroom, the second story of Stepping Stones, there's this scroll, and it's called Greetings, and it's signed by the members of the New York group, thanking Bill for choosing to be with AA instead of going back to Wall Street. And I'm going to read that to you. And I want you to take it in two ways. A tribute and thanks to Bill, but also as a personal challenge. It is given to few to lead the despairing, the weak, and the skeptical out of the darkness and into the light. It is given to few to illuminate the path to deliverance with the twin torches of faith and reason, so that men of all faiths and of little faith may see and believe and live again. To Bill Wilson, therefore, whose works are wrought with that selflessness and anonymity which are characteristic of our principles, and whose labors have aided us in achieving that personal regeneration, moral and mental, which enables us to live more richly, fully, happily, and usefully, this document manifests our enduring gratitude. We extend our sincerest wishes at this season and at all seasons for the personal happiness and well-being of Bill and Lois Wilson. At the same time, and by the same token, we rededicate our lives to the service of those who have not yet gained their release from bondage in which we were commonly held. This we hope to do for many fruitful years under the same inspired leadership, believing as we do that heaven's gate is barred to him who comes along. There are about 180 signatures underneath that scroll, and a visitor said it reminded him of a Buddhist saying which goes, "You cannot get to heaven unless you bring someone with you." In 1979, on Christmas Eve, my girlfriend OD'd and died. 3 years later, my brother and sister were killed in a head-on collision, and 3 years after that, my dad was run over, drunk, crossing the highway in the middle of the night. Now, I'm not happy that those things happened, of course, but I can see for me that there was, my higher power's hand was in there somewhere, somehow. My nature, stupid, stubborn, selfish, was so great that I think my higher power, it needed to be something more drastic than less. And I think that's the case, unfortunately or fortunately for most of us, that it needs to be something like that. There's a good thing about that. When you learn your lesson, you learn it really well. The sad part about it is there are some of us that never learn that lesson. And that's very tragic and very sad. So I was thinking about that part, about people whose lives can be so affected by Alcoholics Anonymous that way, and it was happening to me, and it was starting to get my attention. I remember one time I came out of a blackout, sitting on this stool, bar stool. And this guy, I was arguing with one of my dad's buddies. I have no idea what we were arguing about. And I came out of the blackout for about 10 seconds and then blacked out again. And this is what the guy said to me. He said, "You're not a man. Your dad's a man, but you're not a man." And I came to the next day, and that was the only thing I could remember from that whole night. And it was like, what is up with that? And let me tell you, it rattled around really hard in my head, because he was right. I had no idea what it meant to be a man. I hadn't the vaguest. And it got my attention. Like I really started to looking at myself and getting involved in turning my life around. And thank God that alcoholics came into my life and helped me to understand that. Now, I thought I would explain a little bit about what the Pacific Regional Trustee is, so I hope I'm going to try and do this as quickly as I can. Groups are represented by GSRs, General Service Representatives, and then groups are formed into districts and are represented by DCMs, District Committee Members. And then districts are formed into areas, and they're represented by delegates like Carmelo over here. And in the United States and Canada, there are 93 areas. Usually an area is a state, like Utah is its own area, Nevada is its own area, like that. Some of the more populated states, like California, they have 6 areas. And all of these delegates who are elected by you go to New York in the spring every year, and they do the business of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, the kinds of things that they decide upon aren't what you're going to do with your 7th tradition monies, or whether your meeting is going to be a speaker meeting or a book study meeting. You decide that through your group conscience. The kinds of things that the General Service Conference decide are those things that affect Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. Let me give you an example. This is from the grapevine, too. There was this one delegate, I believe this was in the 60s, and one of the agenda items was to change the wording of that phrase. The only requirement for membership, it used to read, the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stay sober. And the debate was to leave the word honest in or to take it out. The conference lasts a week, so that's pretty important for you to know that your delegate goes back there and represents you for 7 days of meetings, sometimes even after midnight. And he couldn't figure out how to vote on this particular item. And he saw Bill W. walking through the lobby, and he ran up to Bill and he said, "Bill, I don't know how to vote on this. Tell me what I should do." And Bill's reply was the 2nd tradition. Our ultimate authority is a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. That's beautiful. And and these are the kinds of things that the conference votes. When I was a delegate, I was on the literature committee, and it was pretty amazing that like a week, 10 days before I went there, let me just say that the delegates are encouraged to read up on the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, like Dr. Bob and the good old timers, like that, and the service manual. And so I got interested in that, and I wanted to go find the autobiography of Bill W. And I went to this used bookstore looking for it, and I saw on this top shelf this row of big books. And I saw one of them did not have a cover on it. And so I went to reach for that, and it's like as I touched it, I realized there was something different about this big book. And I opened it up, and sure enough, it was a first edition big book. $5. Obviously, they didn't know what they had, because if any of you looked on the internet, big first edition big books are like in the thousands. And so here I am, randomly assigned to be on the literature committee at the General Service Conference, and a first edition big book falls into my hands. You know, and one of the other things that happened is in the third edition, there's a story called Join the Tribe, and some of you might remember that. I had spoken at many service assemblies about how the broken English of that gentleman could be offensive to Native people. As I said, I've met many Native people in AA, and I've yet to meet anyone that speaks like that. And some natives might find that offensive or insulting. I said, I think we need to update the story. Some people appreciated that, and some people didn't appreciate that. And anyway, I went to the General Service Conference, and that became one of our debates, you know, something that we talked about. Like I said, we get background material on each of the agenda items. The debate can go long into the night. This is one of the things that was the background information for this particular item that we were talking about, which was a fourth edition of the Big Book. All changes made over the years in the Big Book, AA members' fond nickname for this volume, have had the same purpose, to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately, and thereby to reach more alcoholics. If you have a drinking problem, we hope you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. And that was one of the things we were asked to consider, to think about as we were deliberating. And our committee presented to the whole General Service Conference the agenda item that there be a fourth edition of the Big Book. Out of the 130 or so voting members of the conference that were there, 93 of them delegates from across the U.S. and Canada, when the vote was taken, there were about 4 people that voted against it. So it was practically unanimous that there be a new edition of the Big Book. And in this fourth edition are 2 updated stories for Native Americans. And so it's just, I'm going to share a little bit about that towards here in a second. And it really means a lot to me. So these areas are then formed into regions. In the United States and Canada, there are 8 regions. You are in the southeast region geographically, but Area 13 is in the northeast region. And when I was a delegate, I campaigned so hard to become a NERD, which is a Northeast Regional Delegate. And I did that again when I was a trustee. I begged and whimpered and whined and bitched and moaned, you know, just made a nuisance of myself. And they took pity on me, I think, and made me an honorary NERT, which is a Northeast Regional Trustee, honorary Northeast Regional Trustee. That's one of my outstanding accomplishments in AA. They wouldn't let me be a nerd, though. I still have to work on that one. But there are 8 regions in the United States and Canada. I'm from the Pacific region, which is made up of the following states: Arizona, Utah, Idaho, California, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Alaska. And my duties as a trustee was to go visit the 15 areas that are in those states twice in the 4 years. And then we also participated at the General Service Board weekends in New York 4 times a year. And that's working on specific committees too. Like Carmela said, I was on the chair of the Trustees Committee. This goes on for 4 years. AA owns 2 corporations: Alcoholics Anonymous, World Services Incorporated, and the Grapevine Incorporated. And like any corporation, they have a board of directors. AA's board of directors is called the General Service Board. There are 21 trustees on that board. 7 are non-alcoholic, Class A's, stands for amateurs, and 14 are Class B's, boozers. And I was one of the Class B trustees from the Pacific Region trustee. And what happens is a person is nominated to that position, and then the delegate, because I believe Carmelo's going to be doing this too, or getting together a resume for your nominee to be presented in next spring. And so the delegate presents to the conference this nominee to become a trustee. And so when I was nominated, they asked the delegate said, "Rod, what do you want me to say?" And I said, "Tell them this jail story. It seems like I'm in jail, and I see these other inmates. They get to go to the pop machine and the candy bar machine, and they're playing cards with the jailers. On the weekends, they get to go outside and wash the cop cars. And I'm like going, who are those guys?" And they said, "Those are jail trustees." Right then, it was my life's goal to become a trustee. I remember the stupid part of my nature, not realizing that the way you get to be a jail trustee is you got to be in jail a long time. So I said, "Yeah, tell them that story." And I was just so floored and so amazed when I was elected. I ask any delegate, pull them aside and just say, "Tell me about when you were elected." You're going to hear a wonderful story. Part of being raised where I was raised, I had this idea of God up in heaven sitting on this throne with this blackboard behind him. And my name is on the blackboard. And every time I do something wrong, this little mark goes on my name. "You little bastard, you stole money out of your mom's purse. You pawned your dad's watch. You got arrested for a DUI. And by the time I was 20 years old, my blackboard was full. And I said, "Rod, you're damned. You're going to hell. There is no hope." And so that's how I lived, godless. And thank God for AA. And so here I am being elected. I was nominated to be the delegate. This is the delegate election that we had in our area back in 97, or I guess it would be the fall of 96. And there's a blackboard, and my name's on the blackboard, and these little marks are going behind my name. And each mark represents somebody who voted for me. Somewhere during those proceedings, I didn't care whether I was elected delegate or not. I was just so moved that these people believed and trusted in my abilities to be their delegate. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't care at that point whether I was elected or not. Here I am, like 14 years before, doing 6 months in the county jail for my 8th or 9th DUI. And what am I doing here where people are trusting and believing in me? It was just more than I could handle. After the election, I was so nervous. There was a water cooler at the back of the room. I went to go get some water. And they had this little spigot, a spigot like when you pour a beer out of a keg. And I tilted the glass. I'm like 14 years sober at the time. But that is truly one of the greatest blessings in my life, to have been elected the delegate. And you ask any of these delegates too, and I'm sure they'll say something similar. And so I was elected to be the trustee. This was in 2010. And my first duty was to go to the International in San Antonio. And that was an amazing, amazing event. I hope all of you are attempting to go to the Atlanta International next year. In San Antonio, there were like 54,000 alcoholics. And they did the countdown, and they said there were over about 600 people with over 50 years of sobriety there. The one who had the longest, they said, was somebody who had 63 years. They thought somebody had 64 years, but it was the guy with 63 years trying to sit back down. It's like we took over the whole city. It was amazing. It's the fellowship and the love. Imagine holding hands with 54,000 other alcoholics and saying the Serenity Prayer. It's like benevolent thunder. You know, it just sends chills up and down my spine when I think about it. So I encourage all of you to go to Atlanta. I'm sure you're going to have a great time. And so in July of that year, we had our first General Service Board weekend. And this is the first time for me to go back to New York. And the chair opened the meeting. There were just 21 trustees and a couple of staff people. And the chair said, I'm going to open it up since we have some new people on the board. Just go around and have everybody take a few minutes to introduce themselves. And so they started over there on that end, and they were coming to me. And my mind is like blown. You know, I'm like going, you got to come up with something really heavy, man. You got to say something profound, you know, knock the doors off of these people. And so I'm like freaking out, you know. I'm trying to look as calm as possible, but inside I'm freaking out. So maybe I should tell them that jail story, you know? The jail trustee story. So I'm just frantic, you know, and this thought comes to me. I went, yeah, that's what I need to do. And I calmed down when I made that decision. And when it got to my turn, I said, I'm going to introduce myself the way that I introduce myself when I go to a sweat lodge. My name is Rod Batoni. I am of the Dene people, the Navajo tribe. My father is of the Edgewater clan, and my mother is of the Towering Rock clan. And I said, I'm introducing myself in this way because I want to bring the circle of Native traditions and beliefs and join them with the circle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I believe both circles are about love and both circles are about healing. And that's what I said. It was a great opportunity to be on the General Service Board and to share that way. I really appreciate this table right here. You know, this group of people here, you know, that have done so much for Alcoholics Anonymous. They are treasures to your area. Take care of them.
Yes, sir.
Understand the significance of their efforts and what they believed in, and that they did it for you. Know that here in your heart, and take care of them accordingly. I learned this lesson by being associated with the Class A trustees. Now I do this, my service work, to save my butt.
Yes, sir.
We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. To me, it says, Rod, if you drink, you're going to be dead. And so a lot of this is me taking care of myself by doing this service work. And I met the 7 Class A trustees on the General Service Board, non-alcoholic. And they do it merely out of the purity of the love that they have in their heart.
Yes, sir.
It's so inspiring. And one of the coolest things, I shared this yesterday at the forum, one of the coolest things is a lot of the Class A trustees, they'll start going, you know, your program, your 12 steps, your big book. And then in about the third year, they go, our program, our steps, our big book. It is so cool. It's just it's so inspiring to just see how, when I think about it, I get emotional. So it was really neat to be part of all of that. The other thing that I wanted to make sure to share with you is the accomplishment and achievement of Navajo translations of the Big Book into audio tapes. And I wanted to tell you all how long of a process that's been. It's been probably over 20 years. And the Navajo AAs and the AA General Service Structure in Arizona they put a lot of time and effort into that. and of course, I'm full-blooded Navajo, so it means a lot to me that Alcoholics Anonymous is doing that. this piece of literature, the literature that's over there, all of that are symbols. They make a statement. And the statement is this: wherever you are, whoever you are, Alcoholics Anonymous is going to try and help you to be sober. That's what all of these things mean, basically. And it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so when the Navajo translation was, well, first of all, in any translation, the translation is done in the fifth chapter, how it works. And then it's tested for accuracy, and the spirit of our message is not diluted in any way. Once it passes those two acid tests, then the rest of the big book is translated into that particular language. The Navajo translation went through that test this spring, and Carmela reminded me of how powerful that was when it was announced at the conference this year. Everybody was just so, of course I was like practically sobbing. I was so happy. And probably in 2016 at the Albuquerque Red Road Convention, they're going to make a presentation from the chair of the General Service Board to somebody from the Navajo delegation of this completed translation of the big book into Navajo and audio tapes. And I told people that we're going to have some mutton stew and fry bread, which is Native American Navajo staples that we have a lot of that to eat. And you're all invited, so keep in touch with the service structure and find out how that's going to go. Right now, it's all based on when the translations are completed. It's estimated they'll be done in November, September next year. So once it's completed, then the other plans will be solidified. So I wanted to share that with you and how wonderful that was. And I'm glad that Carmela mentioned about my mom going to the conference. You know, I had a hard time with this chalkboard God. And somebody said to me, Rod, I don't think you can get sober with that God. Maybe you better think of something else. And I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I did a lot of thinking about it, pretzel logic, going in and out and reading a lot. And I basically, after all of that time and effort, I basically came up with 4 conclusions. My higher power will always love me. My higher power will always forgive me. My higher power will always accept me. And my higher power wants me to be happy. And I remember I said that at the Colorado State Convention, and my mom was sitting down there on the front row, and I looked at her and I said, oh my God, that's what my mom wants too. And it was like I made this leap forward of this understanding of a higher power because I had human proof of that existence right there in front of me. And it just kind of seemed like things clicked in my mind about that. And there was no doubt anymore about what my higher power was for me. And I had a chance to take her to the General Service Conference this year, and she just had a blast. It was amazing. Saturday night, they have a banquet or Sunday night, they have a banquet for all of the attendees. And she came in and sat, and it's probably about this many people, maybe a little less, but there were a lot of people in the room. And what happens with the delegates is they all bring little pins or tacks that they hand out to the other attendees, that are representative of their area. Sometimes they'll hand out pens or bookmarkers or little things like that, little mementos. And so one of the delegates gave my mom a pin, and she put it on her vest. And then another one gave her another pin. And pretty soon she had like about 20 pins on her vest, and people were bringing her these things and putting them on her. And this one lady said, I don't have a pin, but I'll get it to you later on. And then she went into her room and came back and gave her the pin. I said, Mom, that lady took the time out to go up there and get it for you right now. And she was just like floored with how hospitable and kind everybody was to each other. It was kind of funny. She said wherever she went, people would say, they would introduce her, and then they would say, she's not one of us. And she would go, wait a minute, I'm right here with you. How can I not be one of you? And she was talking to one of the tourists back there when they were sightseeing. And she was trying to explain to the tourist why she was in New York about the General Service Conference. And she goes, "I think my son is second in command." And we a bunch of us went to dinner. You know, we had like 20 of us at a table. You know how fun that can be. I'm sure you guys have experienced that. And we're just laughing and having the best old time. And she leans over to me. She says, "Do you guys always have this much fun at dinner?" I said, "Yeah, Mom, we do." And I tell you, of course I'm biased. And you can check with Carmela on this afterwards. On Saturday morning, the trustees get a chance to say goodbye to the whole conference, to the delegation that's attending there. And I had a chance to say goodbye. It was my last conference. This was in May. And they introduced my mom. And I have never seen a standing ovation for a non-alcoholic, non-participant at the General Service Conference, except for that time. And she was just, wow. In a way, you're all responsible for that. And in a way, I owe you all gratitude for that, too. For showing my mom that love that Alcoholics Anonymous has. Because I experienced it here this weekend. You know, it's not any different. I wanted to share with you, I don't know, how much time do I got? 15 minutes? Okay, thanks. You got to watch out for delegates, and they can go on and on and on. You know, old timers, they can. There was this guy at one of the meetings I went to, and he was an old timer, and they asked him to share, and he said, "No, I passed." And then he went on for 15 minutes. So watch out for that. One of the things that has been so powerful for me in my sobriety is the 11th step. You know, this idea of prayer and meditation. And I have to be honest with you again, when it was first introduced to me, I balked. I did not like the idea of it. I said, I don't want to have anything to do with that happy horse crap. You know, next thing you know, I'm going to be hugging trees and drinking tea and lighting candles and quitting smoking and things like that, you know. And I said, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Well, I quit smoking, I've hugged trees, I've drank tea, and I've lit candles. And the only thing I haven't done is become a vegetarian. Anybody ever noticed any vegetarian meal I've ever had, I always say to myself, this could be really good if there was some meat in it. But one of the things about prayer and meditation, and the Sweat Lodge is a real good example of this too, is this idea of sitting and being still. From so many newcomers, I hear two things: boredom and anxiety are triggers. And boredom and anxiety simply means the inability of a person to be comfortable in their own skin. And that's what meditation teaches you, is how to do that, to sit and be still. Now, I was one of the kind that didn't have the right mindset for that. And I've been told that men seem to be more concrete in their thinking and women more abstract in their thinking. And consequently, meditation requires more abstract kind of thinking. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say you slept. And what if in your sleeping you dreamed? And what if in your dream you were in heaven? And what if when you were in heaven you were standing in a field of flowers? And what if when you awoke you were holding one? What then? See, this is the kind of thinking I think that is required, because you're trying to endeavor to be between here and there, whatever there is, and it's different for everybody. I started to do some of that in my life. I started with 5 minutes, and I worked up to an hour-long meditation, and it took a long time. And I was so excited about getting to that point that when I went to the sweat lodge, they're very physically demanding ceremonies. 4 hours to be in that kind of heat, sitting in one place. I saw a guy come out of there and he fainted one time. And so a lot of sweats, I would end up laying on the ground. And then you're crawling out, and I would stumble as I was standing up. And then I would go home and I would take a shower and go right to sleep. And so I was excited about what would happen now that I've got my meditations up to an hour. I sat up straight, on the ground the whole time. I didn't lay down. When I crawled out, I stood right up. I went home, got some gas, went to the store, got something to eat, made it, watched some TV, then took a shower and went to bed. And the only difference was having that 1 hour of meditation. And it's learning how to be in your soul, in your spirit, and in your heart. And I think that's it was so terribly important for me to experience that and then get to that point. I think one of the other things that helped me with that is coming to terms with my mortality, understanding what that is. Carlos Castaneda talks about death as a presence over your left shoulder. And I don't think it's this scary, monstrous thing. I think it's a thing that whispers in your ear. And I think it whispers things like this. Don't take this day for granted. Be sober in this day. Tell those people that you love how you feel about them. Hug them one more time. Kiss them one more time. I think that's what that thing whispers. And I don't think it's a scary thing. I think it's a teaching thing. And going through all of that really helped me to have a more understanding about things for myself. This idea of learning how to be in heart, spirit, and soul became more real for me. It's like one of the old timers said Friday night that he was trying to be the man God wanted him to be, his higher power wanted him to be. And this is kind of what I'm saying. I had no idea about what any of that was. I had no idea about how calming and beautiful and wonderful meditation could be. And I think most of us really don't have an idea about our capacities. And I think that's what that man was talking about. That when you trust in your higher power, these things become relevant to you, and you have an understanding. And that way, you never ever do fail. And you can accomplish amazing things. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me about all of those kinds of things. And this idea of becoming more comfortable with my mortality has helped me to do that. In my meditations, one of the things I like is this saying that we have. Oh wait, I see I've only got 3 minutes, so I wanted to end. And this is how I usually end with this article in the Grapevine that I sent in. I was born on the Navajo reservation, but raised in the Salt Lake City area, away from my culture, language, and tradition. When I started drinking, and during the whole time I drank, I didn't care about any of that. It wasn't until I started getting sober that I began to think about those things and saw how important they are for me. Many natives have their culture first, then AA. I had AA first, then my culture, and I am still learning. I began to see how devastating alcoholism has been to Indian people and to me personally. This understanding of my culture and tradition has enhanced my sobriety, and Alcoholics Anonymous has enhanced my culture and tradition. I want to share 2 readings from the Big Book that show the similar miracle of AA for 2 different people. One a man and one a woman. One Caucasian and one Native. One over 70 years ago and one recently. The first reading from the Big Book. My life is filled with honesty today. I am in love and proud to be a Native American. In an AA meeting on an Indian reservation, I heard the words, "Sobriety is traditional." I stand on the top of the sacred mountain and I listen to the wind. I have conscious daily contact with my Creator, and He loves me. This is from the story, Listening to the Wind. The second reading. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but His impact on me was sudden and profound. From Bill's story by Bill W. in the Big Book. My name is Rod. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you.